Well, welcome, Katrina, and I'm really happy that you've come and spoken here and agreed to be interviewed.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me. It's just been a pleasure from beginning to end.
Same. Absolutely. So I might just start. I guess we want to sort of want this to be available for our students and for others. And I guess the conference is about cultural studies. What do you think is the value or relevance of cultural studies today?
Look, and there's nothing like coming to a conference to have it reaffirmed why it is so important. I've just been in a session that covered the areas of Asia Link and Art in Asia to the immediate and contemporary politics of South Korea. So one of the great things about cultural studies is the breadth and the innovation of its methodologies, because you have a political problem, you want to rethink the dictatorship of South Korea. How do you do it? Well, you find different archives, and cultural studies is always producing different archives by asking different questions. So how do we know that there were mixed ideas of that dictator in South Korea? Except by looking at popular pamphlets, by looking at different stories of people who are now in their 70s who feel more able to speak, by not being afraid of what constitutes the archive. I mean, that's one of the great things that cultural studies does.
What about the role of power, which is has been one of the key tenets of cultural studies?
Yeah. Well, I think that's also fascinating too, because the environment we live in, I believe, is incredibly diverse and connected and interconnected. So power is diverse and diffuse. I mean, I know that just sounds like a straight Foucauldian quote, but it is also an effort to actually map that on. Well, rather the world maps its own maps of power rather than us mapping Foucault onto it. I use Foucault because he still works, because you see eruptions of power in terms of the way people decorate their bodies and make statements that way. You see eruptions of power when you have a head of a government squashing other people. You have eruptions of power when there's a sudden swarming around a topic and people Twitter and people Facebook. And you have other kinds.
Power in the classroom?
Yeah. Now that I worry about that in terms of has that changed as much, because it's a little bit like, it's not dinosaurish. I don't think it's on the edge of extinction, but it's interesting that probably in many ways you could walk into a lecture theatre and it's not going to be that dissimilar to what someone walking into a lecture theatre in the 50s might have experienced, except that there'll be the nattering maps of mobile phones and things. So that's an interesting one. What do you think about that?
I guess I'm also interested in the lecture as a format, and I think we often perhaps disparage of the lecture, but then I guess we had the privilege of hearing quite a few lectures, including Vinay Lal's sort of 2-hour off-the-cuff lecture last night, and I think it has its place, I would say.
Yeah,
amongst others.
I
think that is...
Yeah, well, what I would say about the lecture is that it is an embodied form. And in a very mediated world, maybe the embodied form is rising rather than falling in interest. 2, at a conference, we get to exemplify and see people responding back. So you realise that a lecture is only a lecture while there's an audience and a response. Now, as long as that response-ing, and Penny Rossiter used a fantastic expression in what she has achieved in her classrooms, but what she finds so difficult to talk about, which is response ability, like actually responding as part of your participation. And that's, I don't know whether we do enough of that in many of our lectures,
Okay, and thinking about the classroom as beyond the lecture theatre and perhaps into the tutorial spaces where a lot of our undergraduate students are, might just talk about the value of cultural studies there. For example, what do you see the value of cultural studies in helping people develop critical thinking skills?
I really think one of the greatest traditions of cultural studies is that origin within the personal and within the particular experience of politics in the world. Now, that we've heard a few people from a few different teachers throughout this conference talking about the way in which sometimes their classrooms can get stuck on that. So people are talking about their experiences and then don't make the next step, which is to say, let's also connect that not only just to Foucault or Derrida or whatever, but to me becoming an equal theorist along with these people, that what I'm offering here through my experience and through this environment is not just my story, but the politics of a particular particular cultural site. And that more effort needs to be done there. But I think for students, there's that immediate thing that they matter. And it's not just them, their politics matter, their body matters in our tutorials. Yeah.
Great. I think that's a really inspiring and important thing for people to have that kind of recognition and feel that the tutorial is their place for their experiences and their lives and their bodies, not just their thoughts.
And to get them, on the path to being public intellectuals where they can say, my subculture, I've realised my culture is a subculture, like it's more than me. And I realise that this is a speaking position to speak alongside with these other theorists.
Great. And I guess sort of to wrap this up, one of the things that this conference has really dealt with in terms of its theme is also, I guess, sort of the institutions and also the governmental regimes we're in. This point in time in Australia and perhaps in other countries as well, what do you think is the importance and the role and the function of the university?
Yeah, it's
or what should it be?
Yeah, what should it be or what is it? I think ideally a university is a semi-permeable enclosure that both keeps a possibility of an intellectual community alive while allowing and in fact making flows come in and out from outside. So I guess I'm imagining that semi-permeable enclosure to also have kind of attractors on its side so that people are drawn to the university to come through it and see what's possible in that space, and simultaneously for those in the institution to be drawn out to see how our ideas are working with other audiences and other peoples. So the university in that sense is a place where thinking matters. I mean, for me, that is at the core of it. And then how you make that thinking in terms of writing, how you make that thinking in terms of performance or art or other ways of thinking is still the sort of core project. How that gets managed, how that gets audited, that's where we have to sort of, have our little battles one by one, probably.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much for that, Katrina.
Thank you, Schlunke.
Much enjoyed it. Thanks.